What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and just 3 days ago, we had a Hasbro earnings call to discuss Q3 in 2025 expectations for what's been going on at Hasbro, and obviously the stuff that we're really concerned about here, Wizards of the Coast, and more importantly, what we're concerned about specifically on this channel would be Dungeons and Dragons. They obviously talked about toys, they talked about Magic the Gathering, and so on. But we're going to go ahead and focus on it. Investing.com has a full transcription of the entire event, and we can go ahead and kind of look through that and get a little bit of information. Basically, the biggest takeaways that I can give you up front, for those of you who don't really want to pay attention to the whole video, are essentially things are looking up in general. And the big ones are apparently the 2024 refresh of the D&D 5e rules is the biggest selling out the gate for Wizards of the Coast, or maybe at least for Wizards of the Coast. Not sure about Dungeons and Dragons because I don't know about TSR information, but like the most successful launch of a system ever in the terms, at least of Wizards of the Coast, anyway, D&D. And a big focus on digital gaming going forward from the D&D side, meaning more on the video games. So let's go ahead and dive into that. If you like this kind of stuff, do all the YouTube things, like it, share it, all that good stuff. Subscribe to the channel, etc. Okay. So here it is, investing.com. There's a little bit again of these key takeaways we talked about up front. Basically, Magic, as shocking no one, is continuing to just absolutely balloon up in revenue, and it's doing more and more profit than anticipated due to all of the Universe Beyonds and the, different sort of collaborations. And they cite specifically in here Spider-Man and Final Fantasy doing very well. So if we were to continue to go through this, I think the easiest thing we can do is just search Dungeons and Dragons and then just pull up where that's brought up. So, kind of if we were to scroll through here, we can see um right up at this is at the top here. It talks about how they've got upcoming things for Final Fantasy holiday set, Last Airbender, things that are going to do a lot of work for Magic the Gathering, but the refreshed 2024 editions of Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide are off to the strongest ever start for Dungeons and Dragons books. So again, it says that I'm assuming that's in based on how it's written, that's in its entirety. And honestly, that's not that shocking. Now, some of you may be saying, like, I don't like 2024. I'm sticking with 2014, or I've moved on from D&D and so on. And obviously, you're entitled to your opinion. You can do whatever you want. But think about the popularity of Dungeons and Dragons. And I think this should make sense if we kind of follow this. This is my assumption, by the way. But D&D with 5th edition, the Stranger Things, Critical Role, Dimension 20, all these things has made Dungeons and Dragons a popular pop culture household name. It's everywhere. It's more popular than it's ever been, which would make sense that 2024 D&D being the first sort of new edition. Also, the fact that it's refined a lot of the stuff of 5th edition, made things a little bit easier. The barrier for entry is much lower, would make sense for it to be the most successful, but that's just because of the sheer market share increase of how many people are aware of Dungeons and Dragons. So even if D&D was not, is not as popular potentially in the world of post OGL, it's still infinitely more popular and well known than it was in 2014 when 5e launched. So yeah, apparently this is the strongest out ever start for D&D books. And honestly, we haven't really had much else since then. We had Dragon Delves, which everybody forgot about because it wasn't really marketed that well. We do have now the new box set, the 2 new box sets, the Stranger Things box set, as well as the Heroes on the Borderlands box set. And then Forgotten Realms drops in just a couple days for the early access. So those will kind of be a really interesting step out into what our brand new content officially designed for D&D 5e 2024. Because for the most part, we've basically just been living in terms of new content solely within the 3 core rule books. So, okay. And then D&D Beyond's new accessible virtual tabletop has driven weekly traffic up nearly 50% since the September launch. Now, if you've been following when it says it's virtual tabletop, this means D&D Beyond Maps. Now, if you've been following this for a while, D&D Beyond Maps did not launch in September. It's actually been around for quite a while at this point. But on September 16th, it launched free to anybody who has access to maps on D&D Beyond. A little bit of a breakdown of that. I've talked about it before in the past, but essentially you had to have, I believe it was a master tier subscription to fully utilize D&D Beyond maps, which meant you'd have to pay the utmost amount. The way it is now as of September 16th is if you have access to content on D&D Beyond that has maps in it, you now have access to those maps for free utilizing D&D Beyond maps. So again, probably the best example I can think of is the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. It has maps in it. If you purchased the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide, even if you don't have a subscription and you just have access to, have a not paid subscription, a free subscription, and bought the Dungeon Master's Guide on there just so you'd have digital access to the DMG anywhere in the world. Well, those maps in there, you now can go into D&D Beyond maps and utilize those maps in there without fail. So that's what they kind of changed back in September. Again, just a little bit over a month ago. And apparently that has shown a 50% increase in weekly traffic to D&D Beyond. That is not a small amount. So that's actually pretty significant. I'm very curious to see. I wish there was more on D&D Beyond in this earnings call because there is still quite a bit of stuff on the 2025 D&D Beyond roadmap that has not rolled out yet, and we're starting to run out of 2025 in which to roll it out in. All right, let's move on. What else we got? Okay. Dungeons and Dragons at this point in the discussion. There's a lot about K-pop Demon Hunters as well, because I guess they got non-doll rights to K-pop Demon Hunters for Hasbro. But anyway, Dungeons and Dragons has not really been discussed, but there's obviously a little bit more emphasis on the brand as you guys expand more into the space. Can you just maybe help us think about what the long-term growth prognosis is for Dungeons and Dragons relative to Magic the Gathering, or maybe what incrementally it might add to Wizards of the Coast over time? And here we have, I think the big thing for Dungeons and Dragons is going to be digital games. We have several games in development. We're working with some fantastic creators in the space. Like I said, for entertainment, we tend to be a little gun shy talking about projects too early. Very likely over the next, call it, couple of quarters, you're going to see more of our digital ambitions come to life with Dungeons and Dragons and understand some of the things we have in development. I think they're going to be pretty exciting. Baldur's Gate 3 was a seminal project. I think it really showed that if we build something that's great, consumers will come. There's probably 5 projects in development for Dungeons and Dragons across our portfolio, ranging from more casual and kid-oriented to very high-end action, adventure, and role-playing games. That's in addition to the continued focus on building out the core business, the core TTRPG, with a special emphasis on D&D Beyond as the best place to play a TTRPG. It's not the best place to play TTRPG. It's the best place to play D&D Beyond, or to play D&D, I guess, technically. But either way. So digital gaming. This is a wild concept to me, given the fact that just a couple years ago, they canned, like, what, 5 video games at a given point? I don't know. I covered it when it happened, but there was a bunch of D&D video games in the hopper, and then a whole bunch of them got canned. I think even an MMO, if I recall, was being developed or worked on for Dungeons and Dragons, and they just canned that as well. We covered not that long ago some leaked footage of some of the D&D games that were in the works that got canceled. But yeah, I guess they apparently have 5 projects in the hopper, from more casual and kid-oriented to very high-end action, adventure, and role-playing games. So again, I don't know what this is going to look like. I do think it's smart. They've done things that are very well received, like the Young Adventurer series, which are like, they're not chapter books, but they're kid-oriented books to just give them information on the lore and world of Dungeons and Dragons. So it doesn't really like dive into the mechanics of how the game works, the Young Adventurer series, but it does give you information about like what is a barbarian, what is a wizard, here are some magic items, here are some monsters, and is good for, elementary school to middle school age kids to give them that sort of background, or honestly for people that are older that don't want to take like a huge deep dive into the world of D&D without kind of brushing up a little bit on what it is. So the Young Adventure Guide series, or they're really good for that. So it does make sense to try to capitalize on that casual and kid-oriented, aspects. I mean, I do think the new starter set is very kid-oriented as well, as it's very board gamified with the different cards and abilities that way. But I mean, if you want to get kids into D&D early, building a product that will allow you to easily make that transition just makes sense. It allows people like myself and others who have kids that love D&D and role-playing games to get them in. And then again, very high-end action adventure and role-playing games. So again, I don't know if this is going to be Baldur's Gate 4 necessarily, or this is going to be, more action adventure games, which we've obviously seen tank in the form of Dark Alliance, but either way. They even reference again Baldur's Gate 3 here as a seminal project. Of course, they're going to reference Baldur's Gate 3. It was wildly successful. But they do state here, we really showed that if you build something great, consumers will come. Yeah, that's true about anything. But again, I don't know if you're ever going to get another Baldur's Gate 3. The time between Baldur's Gate 2 and Baldur's Gate 3 was significant, but you gave Larian Studios roughly, I think, 5 or more years to build Baldur's Gate 3. And they seem to kind of be given a little bit more leeway to build what they wanted and make the game that they wanted, and then continue to support for basically 2 full years after the fact. I don't know if you guys saw recently, but basically a native version of Baldur's Gate 3 was launched on Steam Deck because one dev wanted a better version of Baldur's Gate 3 to play on a Steam Deck. So that dev built that by themselves essentially in their spare time, because that's the kind of studio and people that work at Larian. My concern would be releasing a Baldur's Gate 4 so soon after Baldur's Gate 3 is you will not be able to give it the proper amount of time to grow. And I don't know what studio out there has put out banger after banger that deserves the right to even hold the mantle and stand where Larian Studios stood. It's a lot riding on them, whoever decides to take up that mantle and try to do it. But you also, like, for those of you who, follow what goes on with like TV projects and movies, when a studio messes too much with a movie or something, you kind of lose the what was the initial soul of whatever that project was. And I don't know this for a fact, but from what I could tell from talking to folks at Larian, from watching all the interviews and things and seeing the final product, it seems like they were almost kind of given a lot of leeway to make what they want. And I have to imagine that after the success of Baldur's Gate 3, the studio is going to want to get a lot more involved in Baldur's Gate 4 to do what they think is what's best to make that game be what they want it to be. And I think that's ultimately going to fly in the face of what made Baldur's Gate 3 so great. If you were to try to get too much studio mingling with the game, I don't know, but there you have it. I kind of went through this. This is pretty much everything. I've read through this whole article, and I had filmed a longer version of this where I sort of just skimmed through it, but it was 25 minutes and we basically didn't touch on that much. So, yeah, the big focus is going to be, to take away from this is that obviously Magic continues to crush it in the eyes of Wizards of the Coast. They are looking to have, I think they said $1 billion in cost savings by 2027, if I recall. And they've done little bits here and there. Hopefully none of this is going to lead to more layoffs. Yes, targeting $1 billion in cost savings by 2027. But yes, Magic continues to crush it and probably will continue to do so with new things like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and other projects going into next year. The D&D books that launched for 2024, regardless of what you feel about them or how you feel about them, the numbers did work, and it's the most successful launch of a D&D sort of edition, if you will, ever. And the future of D&D is going to be not heavily focused, but there will be a focus on digital aspects. Seemingly these 5 or so games that are in development between now and who knows when. But I don't know. It is kind of funny to hear basically almost the day before they shutter completely Project Sigil that they're having a heavy focus on D&D and digital games and then cancel Project Sigil basically like the next day. But anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. I'll see you all next time.